May I ask Sister Sokchen to open us with a pray for our speaker this morning? Thank you so much.
Okay, let's pray. Lord, we just want to thank you for this awesome hour that you have prepared for us. Lord, we know that this morning is not just a talk that's organized by man-made plan, but Lord, we know that it is a special talk. It is prepared and it is held by you. Lord, we just want to thank you for what you have done in Nicholas' life, how you have prepared and equipped him, and through his reflection, through his years of knowledge, through his years of experience. But we know that this special hour, you will speak to us through him and to help us to grow, how to be a good steward. How shall we see our wealth and what we have in hand that's from you? But we just want to commit this time into your precious hand. Lord, please speak to us through your beloved child. We just want to commit Nicholas into your hand. Through him, Lord, we just want to listen to your voice. In Jesus' most precious name we pray. Amen.
Nicholas, all yours. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you. It's a real blessing, privilege to be here. Let me just start by sharing my screen if you can see. I think this is the one. Hopefully you can see my PowerPoint. Okay, great. Yeah, I think just as Fuji mentioned, thanks so much for being patient. It's been a lot of things going on, but it's been a real blessing for me to be here. And as just now Lisman shared about the survey results, and for me, I don't know about you, but for like the past few months, starting from April, right, just hit circuit breaker. Really, I don't know what the Lord has been speaking to you, but for me, it's really kind of like slowing down, asking the Lord, teach me, Lord, to number my days, right, and to gain a heart of wisdom. And then I think from that perspective, I can share some reflection. First of all, can you see the slide move? Yep. Good. Yeah, you can see the slide move. You can see my World Food Program slide. Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. So before COVID, I think from it was I had an intense period of traveling. I think it was like I think from in I think around from September, October, all the way till February, right? It was like I was out almost 80%, 90% around, and it was around. I think I may have circled the world around 2 times. You name it, every continent from Europe, US, South America, Japan, China, and all that, right? Except for North Korea. So, but one of the person that I've actually had chance, the privilege to meet at the time, and I managed to bring my family along quite a number of the trips. So I have 3 kids, and they came along with me to the US, to Europe, and my wife and I were in US, and we had a chance to meet David Bisley, who was a former governor of South Carolina, and he's now the head of the World Food Program, and he recently, not okay, maybe about 2-3 months back, he warned about a global hunger pandemic that's coming amidst threats of coronavirus and everything. And I think we're beginning to see some of that signs and symptoms. I think recently China had a flood that they wiped out. I think this year they're going to be in deficit, 150 million tons of grain. North Korea is going to be in deficit, I think 1 million ton. And typically when North Korea was in deficit, they can count on China. But since China is deficit, and then you hear about all the locust issues in South Africa and all that, things don't really look good. All of us are here, stuck in Singapore. My 3 kids. My kids are all homeschooled, which is why they could travel with me for about. We were on the road together for about 4 weeks, but during this circuit breaker, my daughter Rosaline, she's 6. She was writing snail mail to all her friends and neighbors, a little mailbox outside the house because couldn't meet anybody, right? Just but yeah, so it's we're all in the same situation, and my first thought that kind of came to my mind, and I've had some conversations, was, what if there is a food shortage in Singapore, as I mentioned, right? So like China have this food shortage and flooding and a wipeout. Well, I was in Brazil in March, and I spoke to some of the leaders there, and the good thing is that at the time they don't seem to have a situation of food shortage. In fact, they were happy to export all of their food, but after that, COVID hit them quite badly, and so nobody knows for sure. But this is kind of like really a question and reflection, and maybe one more thing is that I did speak with one of our Christian ministers in Singapore, and he's very involved with this whole COVID situation and all that, and he said he did have moments in the past few months where he went to bed not knowing for sure that the next day Singapore would have enough food. He said there were moments like that, right? So it's quite real, and I think this is a time really to think about and to really seek the Lord on what the Lord will have us to do. Today I kind of want to cover in this four broad areas. It's going to take a while, so unfortunately I don't think I can go deeply into many of the areas, but I hope that as you stay with me, and I'm not coming maybe from unfortunately you might be disappointed from an expert who studied this topic as deeply as some people I know, but if I can come from, first of all, my personal reflection, number one, and also I would assume that many all of us here are believers, and you have heard about the fundamental topics like that, being financially free and all that. So I wouldn't necessarily go too deep into the basics as well. And to be honest, I'm also not necessarily sharing from a position of strength. I've also made some mistakes myself and learned along the way. So I'm also sharing from a point of humility and vulnerability. So first question and trivia, if you can help me by putting in the chat, how many times did the Bible mention money? Don't Google it, right? just to kind of like get everyone a bit warmed up. 20, 25, 77, 100. Okay, looking promising. 700. Okay, 66. Well, actually, the Bible mentioned about money 2,350 times. 16 out of 38 parables talked about money, and 1 out of every 10 verses in the Gospels deals directly with the subject of money. And and you know this verse, right? So no one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other, and you cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. I just kind of like just a point to everyone. I so at least one wins, yes, or at least it's a. Well, there's this saying that you don't have to be the fastest runner. You just have to, if the bear is chasing you, you just have to run faster than the next guy, right? The last guy, right? But yeah, so this is the truth is that God is very concerned about money. At least He's very concerned for us as far as money is concerned. Some of these you may have heard before in terms of currency, understanding currency and God, but I thought I'd just quickly cover a basic, and I'll add one more about cryptocurrency. Is something that a few friends and I've been just talking about a little bit recently, right? So I'm not sure you know this. This is the evolution of money. This is a basic principle. In the past, right at the beginning, people used to trade by exchanging goods, right? Barter trade. And then after that, they say, okay, instead of trading, like I exchange my rice for your wine. Let's use gold and silver, and in many ways, if you look at the Bible, gold and silver is God's currency, and I'll talk a bit about that. And barter trade still exists today in a very big way. When I was in China, one of my clients was a Huawei, and Huawei is very notorious right now. One day they said, we need to have lunch at our restaurant, and said that, would you like to have some wine. And I said, no, we're working. I shouldn't be having wine. I said, but you have to try our wine, Huawei wine. So I was like, okay, you got me really interested. Why does Huawei, the biggest telco equipment manufacturer in the world, have wine? Oh, say it's very simple, Nick. We went to Argentina and we sold them 500 million worth of telco equipment, and we got back most of it in wine. So even a company as big as Huawei does butter trading, right? So, but this is the most fundamental. And then it changed to gold and silver, and then government started to issue currency, which is backed by hard money. So in a time when currency was first issued, it was a note that says that this is how much gold I have in the reserve, and this paper is a representation of how much gold there is. It was actually 1-to-1. It was hard backed, right? It was backed by hard money. If I had $1 here, it means that there's $1 worth of gold in the Federal Reserve somewhere sitting in there, right? That was how it started. During Nixon's time in 1971, right? The government in US decoupled currency from the legal tender, from the hard money, which means that became the time where you could print as much as you want, and that's what we're seeing today. We're printing as much as we want, and that results in a few issues. It means that if I give you $1, this dollar may no longer be backed by $1 worth of gold somewhere, right? It could be and this concept called fractional reserve banking started. Fractional reserve banking is understood in a few ways, but in one of the ways is that, okay, now I'm only having a fraction of what is backed in, and the fraction becomes, and when they introduce the concept of FRB, so basically if you look at this concept, from $1,000 deposit is right, you can end up with $4,000 in just 2 or 3 cycles. And I think someone told me that, I haven't checked the latest number right now, for every I think for every dollar that's out there circulating in the market, what's in the bank is only like a one out of like 100,000 fraction, right? Which means that if everybody went to the bank today to draw out, in the US, to draw out their money, the bank will be bankrupt. The banks will be bankrupt like 100,000 times over or something like that. This is the ills of what happens. So which means that you come to the point where you don't really know what your money is worth. You don't really know what the US dollar is worth, but the whole world's trading based on US dollar, and there's a whole argument and debate why US dollar, why not RMB, why not euros and all that. But that's another topic for another day, right? But yeah, this is the issue, which means that the money that you're holding in your wallet, especially the US dollar, is no one really knows what it's worth, and is it really worth what it's supposed to be worth, right? So then introduce the idea that if this thing goes unchecked, then there could be a scenario which they call hyperinflation. What does hyperinflation look like? Well, there's a country called Zimbabwe that experienced that, and the story. So you can be a trillionaire if you are in Zimbabwe, or you can buy. I think this Zimbabwe. Someone told me, said, if you bought this, own this Zimbabwe currency, actually the returns is quite good, because at one time it was worth nothing. Now people actually trade it on eBay. This $1 trillion note, you can sell it on eBay for like $10, $20. So it's actually quite good returns, because it's actually worth nothing. It costs, I think the paper itself costs more than the worth of the currency, right? And I think see, look at the text there, right? The country's central bank could not even afford the paper on which to print its worthless $1 trillion notes. And I think there was a story of a mom who lost her mind when her son asked her if he could buy a chewing gum at the supermarket. And when she was checking out to pay for it, she realized that the chewing gum cost the same as what she used to pay for her house just like 6 months before that, right? Just this is what happens when you hyperinflation. And it's not impossible, right? It's not impossible. We've seen it happen in a country like Zimbabwe. This was some time back. I think the situation has improved slightly. Yeah. So again, another fundamental concept is debt, right? So what does God say about debt, right? And I just want to mention the important principle that the Bible actually says that the borrower is servant to the lender. In some translation, it says the borrower is slave to the lender. Always remember that. Always remember, as long as you borrow, the Bible says you are either the servant or the slave to the lender. So, and here's a quick trivia, right? Or like a cost of debt, right? Just to give everybody's mind a little bit of exercise this morning. If you bought an item of 5,000 worth and paid the minimum as the credit card requires, a bit of touching on personal finance, how long would it take to pay off the debt? We don't have time. I'm not going to go into it, but I'll just give you the answers. It will take 195 months or something like that, right? And I think if you did based on interest rate of 28% and all that. So I think just a quick anecdote to say that, be really, really careful when it comes to debt, right? And there's a whole, I'm sure in your church and if other places you've heard about it as well, but debt is something that you really, really want to avoid, right? Now, some people say that God's currency is gold and silver, and a lot of it is based on this verse. The silver is mine, the gold is mine, and I mentioned just now that it all started in US after barter trade. It was trading in gold and silver. I just want to share 2 or 3 thoughts. I generally believe it, and I do have a bit of so-called myself, gold and silver, and but I want to give you 3 thoughts. If you actually invest and you actually put money in gold and silver, I want to give you a few thoughts. First of all, it would be, why is it useful, right? I think recently you've noticed that gold price has shot up significantly, right? And it's always what they call a flight to safety. But this time during COVID, it did shoot up, but it didn't shoot up as much as people thought it would, because part of their money went somewhere else. It went to cryptocurrency, right? I think and some other stuff. So now I'll talk a bit, which is why I say I'll talk a bit about crypto. But there's what they call a flight to safety. But why is gold and silver important, right? Going back to my one of the first few slides, because that is how people trade it, right? That I give you a legal tender says that there's a dollar because there's a dollar in the Federal Reserve and all that. So that's the importance of gold and silver. In the situation of hyperinflation, well, there's then the currency is not worth anything else. Then your gold maybe now used to trade $100. In hyperinflation, your gold could trade maybe $1 million, right? Or it could even be true for your crypto. Your crypto could be worth $1,000 today or $10,000 today. In a situation of hyperinflation, your same crypto could trade to $1 million, right? In that sense, and that's, I think, part of that. Now, someone said that the difference between crypto and gold is that gold, at least you can use it to make something that has some worth. Crypto has totally no worth, right? In the sense that it's totally digital, in a sense, and I'll talk a bit more about it. But I want to talk about gold and silver. 3 things, right? Gold and silver is only useful if it's in your custody. If you buy it and then you store it somewhere, I think some of these banks offer services. When crisis hits, the custodian may not give it back to you. That's number 1. So you have a problem with storage, because if you store a lot of gold, how are you gonna? If you store it at home, give me your address, I'm going to rob you. Okay, just kidding, right? But right, how will you store it? And most importantly, in the case of a situation, how will you trade it? Can you walk around with a gold bar and start trading? It's going to be, I say, you'll get robbed before you get anywhere and do anything, right? So these are very practical thoughts and concerns. How would you trade gold, right? So the advice to say, keep in small tradable amounts. Like for the ladies, you might love to hear this, your earrings, your rings and stuff like that. Or get your gold minted in small amount, or even your silver. So at least then you go to somebody and say, hey, it used to be a loaf of bread is $2. In hyperinflation, if a loaf of bread is $1,000, you at least can go there and say that, hey, if I give you this minted gold coin, can you give me a loaf of bread? So this is the kind of scenarios that you might have heard about and people are talking about. But I say I don't have all the answers for you. I'm sorry, but I'm just giving you some considerations about what's out there and what you need to think about if you are thinking about gold and silver as God's currency. A lot of people also talk about land, and it comes from this verse that God, he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, right? And for the world is God's and everything's on it, right? And again, I think land ownership is good, it's important, right? But I want to highlight to you that HDB or condominium ownership is not quite the same as land ownership. You don't really quite own the land, right? In fact, there's one family in Singapore. Unfortunately, I know them. They own the land in perpetuity, but they carve it out in 99-year blocks for other and sell to other people, right? But so they, I mean, in a way, as Christian, they are smart. They own the land in perpetuity, but when they sell, you buy from them at the high price, but only for 99 years, right? So my question is, who really owns this land? If you buy a land, who really owns it? If you borrow from the bank, who owns the land? The bank owns it, not you. Yeah, not only does the bank own it, the bank have you to work for them to take care of their land and their property, right? So it's yeah. And question is, if you buy land, is it overpriced, right? I had a young fresh graduate come and talk to me and say, Nick, and he got himself a job and say, oh, I want to celebrate. I want to thank God. I want to thank God because I bought a condominium and it was a really good price. I say, how much do you pay for it? Oh, it's only 1,700 per square feet, and he paid $1.2 million for it, and it was like in the outskirts. I was like, oh, and this was like during COVID. This is during COVID. I was like, okay, I'm not sure. So my question is, when you buy, be careful. Don't be overpriced, because what happens when it crashes? What happens in a crisis, right? I would say that the general wisdom is that if you own the land that's freehold, 999 or freehold, right? Then it should be okay. But every other type of property investment, I think really think twice. Don't ever get into speculation, right? I have a friend. He's been speaking to me. He's a bit of a business associate, and he made a lot of money in the early days, and he bought some property, right? Today he owns a piece of a bungalow, and he says, Nick, I've been trying to sell it. I said, how much you're putting it in market for? He says, I said, what's your plan? I'm going to sell it, and I'm going to move to a condominium. I said, how much you're trying to sell it for? He said, $11 million, right? And it's about, I think, 10,000 square feet. And you know what? The problem is I don't think anybody has the ability to buy it from him right now. And he's been out in the market for a while, right? So there's real, even though you have the money, but if it's not liquid, you can't trade it, you have a problem, right? When it comes to crisis, like in his case, he needs the money, right? But he would have to, if you want to sell it, it's not easy to get rid of it. So I'm just talking about very practical concerns. Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. I first of all, disclosure, I've never bought any. I've got friends who bought, some people who lost money, some people who made money. I've never bought any. To be honest, I've never really looked at it closely until recently when I mentioned that the gold shot up, so did Bitcoin, and trying to understand a bit more about it. These are the early things I think about, right? I say, first of all, the good thing is that it's not within the banking system. So we talk about fractional reserve banking and all that. So that's kind of like, in a way, it can be an alternative, just like gold. It's fairly easy to trade with technology. And we've seen it go up and down, right? So it's gone, like I've got friends who bought it $1,000, sold it at $10,000, then it dropped back down to $1,000 and all that. So at first I think it's very fluctuates too much, and nobody knows for sure. But at the same time, now it's back to $10,000, so it feels like it's rather resilient, right? So I take that with a big pinch of salt, right? At the same time, I think most importantly, I understand that unless if you can find me a verse about cryptocurrency, please send it to me, right? It's not God's currency. It's subject to a lot of hacking, right? So we heard about a few hackings, and then this thing called forking, where you go and Google it up, right? Where something goes wrong, they can go back to 1 week ago, right? So it's really strange, and nobody really knows where this is going, right? Nobody really knows. So I said, if you are thinking about crypto, I'm just laying out for you. Nobody really knows. I personally would not hold this as a long-term holding or asset. So I shared some quick fundamentals and basics, and I'm just watching time, right? So what happens, right? Food for thought. If there is a food shortage in Singapore, right? It's not unreal. It's in fact, it could be very real. Right? Why? Especially for Singapore, because we don't actually produce. So what's Singapore's goal for food security? I mean that's a whole different topic. But I think Singapore has a goal to say that we will produce 30% of our food within Singapore by when? By 2030. Which means that right now we don't actually produce much at all, right? And not even so that this is a very real scenario when countries that used to trade, when China, when they face food security or issues internally, domestically, they stop shipping out, or even our neighbors and all that. This could be a real scenario. Yes, we read in the news about diversification of food sources and all that, but this could be real. And when there's food shortage, the other thing I think about is what happens if there's food shortage. Then what happens is that Singapore has to take more money to exchange with other countries for the same amount of food. Maybe like Singapore has to say go and get eggs, right? And then say that, okay, Singapore government will go and help us to trade for eggs, or somebody will trade for it. It used to be 10 cents, and eventually it could end up being $10, $20, $30, right? And when that happens, then we have a real issue. And what happens if our money, right, our Sing dollars is no longer worth much, right? In Singapore, what happens, right? And I want to give you some thoughts, right? How rich do you think Singapore is? How much do we have in reserves? Okay, again, okay, you know what? Why don't you just type in the chat and see how don't Google this. 50B, 2 trillion, 100 billion. Okay, 400 billion, very good, all good responses. I think 5 trillion. Okay, I just did a quick check actually yesterday. I think this is our major sources of reserves, right? So our official reserves, and then there's a Temasek and GIC. So it's not too shabby. It's $1 trillion when actually our neighbors further up north are like I think down to their last 100 billion and heavily in debt, right? So we're not too shabby, but I want to put things in perspective. I'll put things in perspective. How much is Apple worth today? Anybody? No Googling. Apple is worth $2 trillion. So we are our country is half the size of Apple, right? As far as, of course, we're not looking at the same metric, yeah? Look, a country's reserve is not the same as a company's market cap, but if you think about it, Apple is worth 2 trillion, our national reserves is only worth close to 1 trillion, you know, if these numbers are correct, right? Because some of these are, when I say if it's correct, because some of these, Temasek can say on paper they are 300B, but we don't really know how much of it is, if they call all the money back today, do they really collect back 300B? Nobody knows for sure, right? Same for GIC. And by the way, I should highlight the currency differences. Yeah, so actually it's not a trillion US. It's slightly below because you have to convert the Temasek and GIC to US dollars. Now, how about this? The US spent 6 trillion, right? And thrown more than 6 trillion just since for the past 3-4 months. So I just want to give you perspective. We always talk about Singapore's reserves, but in perspective, in the scheme of things, it's really not a lot. It's really not a lot. In the case of hyperinflation, or when cases where countries do not want to sell food to us, and we got to take a lot more money, 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, 100 times to exchange for the same amount of goods, this reserve could be wiped out overnight. Just to give you a right? Singapore, we talk about social contracts, HDB, CPF. Now there's a new social contracts, JSS, SIRS, the new one that's being announced, just announced yesterday or something like that, called Job Growth Incentive. We even have now insurance is not a Singapore social contract, but the reason why I mentioned insurance here is that once I had a client in Kuala Lumpur, and they're one of the biggest companies. And he said to me, Nick, Singapore government is really good. I said, why? He said, when there was flooding in Singapore and all the cars in the condominiums got flooded, the insurance companies didn't want to pay. The Singapore government made the insurance companies pay. Right? I said, wow, Singapore government is really good. He said, you know why? So we had the same situation in Kuala Lumpur where all the flooding happened, and there was a Supreme Court where all the cars of the judges and the lawyers were flooded, and they couldn't get a single cent out of the insurance company. So that's my context in saying that there is a bit of social security and social contract in our insurance, at least in Singapore. But I also want to give you the grim reality. What you see right now is say, oh, SIA let's go of 2,400. Suntec releases 50% workforce. It's just the beginning of a trickle. If the intervention measures don't work, we're looking at a worst case scenario of 280,000 jobs lost by end of the year, right? What if other countries stop exporting food to us? What if our reserves ran out? What if a personal health crisis hit? And what if there was a situation, I think it was 10, 20 years back, where AIG almost collapsed because of financial crisis, everything kind of like steamroll and spiral, and AIG almost collapsed, right? So I just want to let you think about think about some of these things. Now, HDB in my mind is a social contract. In my mind, okay, first of all, I stay in HDB. Okay, some of you probably stay in much nicer places. I stay in HDB, and I told my wife, we should continue staying in HDB unless we can unless we really want can afford and to buy a freehold landed and all that. But even if we can afford, we're not sure that's the best way we want to spend use money. There's many other ways to use money, but the reason why I buy in stay in HDB, because at least there is a social contract. If something goes wrong and emergency happens and all that, at least I know that the government will not evict me immediately, because if they do that, they have to evict everybody else as well, right? I mean, that's how I think about it. But at the same time, for those of you who are fresh grads or all that, you're thinking about buying a HDB and all that, my advice to you, don't overpay. Don't overpay, because to me, HDBs are very overpriced right now, right? So I live in Queenstown. A lot of HDBs around are worth more than $1 million. I used to live in Bishan. There was a lot of $1 million HDBs as well. They are overpriced. If you buy a BTO at low price and all that, it's good, right? But I said don't overpay. So what about me? What about you? I want to talk about just maybe 3 things, right? Just being in the world, but not of the world, living simply, and being a blessing. Let's look at the Bible and what the Bible says, right, about contentment and living simply, right? So look at the birds. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns, for your heavenly Father feeds them. Aren't we far more valuable to him than they are, right? Trusting God to feed us and to live simply, that God will provide, right? And in First Timothy is a warning, right? For true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth, right? After all, we brought nothing with us when we came to the world. We can't take anything with us, right? If we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. For those who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evils, and some people craving money have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. We know this. I'm sure many of you do practice it, contentment and living simply. It's just a reminder, right? The other thing is this, right? And as you think about us living out our faith and being Christians, right? I don't want to be in a position, and I hope that that's the same for you, that when crisis hits, right, and things happen, that we are just so busy trying to survive and take care of ourselves that we can't be a blessing. I think those are the best time, right, to be a blessing to others, right? And the Bible talks about in 1 Timothy 6, right, to use our money to do good, to be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others, right? And in this, we'll store up treasures as good foundation for the future, right? So my point is, you can only do this if you have a sound financial management and understanding of money and wealth. And then when the time comes, when everybody else around you is hurting, in a way a bit like right now, that you could be a blessing to others instead of having to be a burden or having to actually not just surviving, but actually having to require help and bailouts from others, right? Yeah, okay, so coming to something very practical, right? Okay, so develop a personal financial plan in case you don't, right? It's very simple principles. It's deliberately kept simple. Total your income, assess your money expenses, subtract your money expenses from the income, rework the budget if in deficit, right? And live within the budget, right? Avoid taking on debt, right? In today's scenario, in Singapore scenario, it's really, really difficult. But I'll give you an example. I took on debt to buy my HDB flat, right? So very, very honestly, but what I avoided taking on debt from the banks. So I took on the debt from HDB, and again, it goes back to the social contract, right? But still, it's best if you could avoid altogether. But it's just that they're difficult, right? In Singapore, then when you take on debt, just remember the servant is the borrower is always servant and slave to the lender, right? Start investing, start safeguarding, start inflation proofing, right? And start seeking God about what that means. I say we're all seeking God and look at being a blessing. And most importantly, if you're not sure, always seek godly counsel. Always seek godly counsel, right? In these matters. Now, I think God used us in unexpected places. From what I just shared with you, God has put me in front of some of the top leaders around the world. I was asked to speak at the conference, the World Internet Conference, which hosted by President Xi himself. I hosted the Chinese Youth Minister. You see Grace Fu there on her right is the Chinese youth minister. I hosted him in Singapore, and he hosted me in China. And then I led the Singapore delegation to the Nanjing Youth Olympics, and I was hosted by some of the national leaders and all that. So just kind of like from my 20 years of working in the church, and you know how challenging some of those work can be, to God using and putting me in a place where I'm trusted by the Chinese government, right? I just want to share that with you, that God, don't put God in a box. Don't put God in a box in how he would lead you, and fully trust and follow him, right? That's my point. Yeah, this was some photos actually just from late last year, early this year, and just as God has brought me around the world to meet with world leaders, right? So I was hosted by a Saudi prince. He drove me around his nice sports car, so driven around by a Saudi prince. I spoke at the Brazilian Congress with the Brazilian leaders. I was put in a room with Donald Trump. I have no idea why and why, but that was, if you can see that little that guy in the far corner with yellow hair, and that picture that you see with two guys shaking, that is the foreign minister of North Korea and the foreign minister of Japan, and I was just right there in front of them. And so God has brought me around the world, and just to see and witness and experience really, really unexpected things beyond my wildest dream and imagination. And I'll close with this because I'm watching time. That a very wise man once told me, our Christian walk is like this. It's like this picture. You're standing at the foot of a hill, and God is saying, go and scale this mountain peak. Go and take this mountain peak. Now, when God gives you that choice, you have a few response. You can stand there and say, wow, this is great. This mountain is great, and do nothing. Or you can start scaling and like, and it's treacherous, it's difficult, right? And it's going to be very challenging. And or I joke, I say you can also ask for a helicopter and take you all the way to the top, right? If you can afford it, right? but my point is that if you stand there and do nothing, right? And I'll share the next picture. Then this is where you're going to land up. For me, I think one of the first milestones and mountains that I scaled and responded to God as the first step was to go to China for ministry. That for me was what was the first step, 20 over years ago, right? That was for the first step, right? But actually, once you reach the top and you are there, then you see this picture. Just can't remember this picture. When you're there, actually behind this mountain peak, there are many other mountain peaks. And that is a kind of like a picture of our Christian life, right? The problem is that when you are here below, you can't see what's behind. You can't see where God wants you to go, right? To my point about God bringing us on unexpected journeys. But when you get up there, then you start to realize that from this vantage point, or one mountain point, you can see the other mountain peak, and God will tell you, say, hey, you see the next mountain peak? That is actually where I want you to go. And then you go to the next mountain peak. That's where I want you to go. The next mountain peak, that's where I want you to go, right? So that is how someone described to me. And you know what? In between mountain peaks, there are valleys, right? So this is but the thing is that sometimes we want God to tell us this is your one big objective in life, but actually it's all about taking the next step, following God and being obedient in the next step. What do you want me to do next? And for me, this is a bit of how it looks like, right? It's just to give you a sense, right? But for me, from China, first of all, then suddenly it's like, oh God, you really want me to go to visa? And then the next step, GCF, and many others, right? And I want to just say that many times we are like that rat inside this maze, we're like running around and we have no idea. But God sees from a high level, and God can see exactly where are the vantage point, but we can't see it. We are like in that maze, but God sees everything, and He sees everything from a very high vantage point. And I'm going to end here with this food for thought, right? For you to think about, and maybe this for your discussion as well. So, what have you been seeking the Lord for? What does the Lord want you to do? Not 10 years from now, but today. What has the Lord been speaking to you? What has the Lord been wanting you to do today, right? And think about how can you be a blessing, right? Beyond just surviving, And I'll add one more, which I didn't really talk about, but something I've been thinking about. If tomorrow the Lord calls you, and some of our full-time workers here, at least one that you know this well. If the Lord calls you today and say, hey, come and do this, do that, will you say, Lord, I'm ready, here I am? Or will you say, oh, sorry, I still got to pay off my mortgage. I still have to do this. I still have to do that. I can't do that kind of thing, right? And I think this is something that's I'm going to end here, and maybe if you have time for any questions or discussions. And yeah, and I also want to kind of say that feel free actually just to Fuji knows that sometimes it's a bit hard to get me, but you know, drop me email and a note. I'd love to see if there's enough of us, you know, to discuss this topic, some of these topics more deeply and learn together.